Grayson Middle School was alive with the kind of chaos only a school bell could unleash. The air buzzed with excitement, relief, and restless energy. But for Lily Morgan, it was a world of cold shoulders and sharper whispers, a place where invisibility felt safer than attention. She moved like a shadow, head down, pulling her worn jacket tighter against the late autumn chill. Her backpack hung heavy, the worn straps digging into her shoulders like a reminder that life wasn't gentle. Her shoes were second-hand, soles uneven, carrying her silently through a sea of indifference. Visual, close up on Lily's face, eyes flickering with quiet fear as laughter rings out behind her. Suddenly, a voice sliced through the noise, cruel, taunting. "Hey, superstar, ready for your big debut?" Lily froze mid-step. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't dare look back. Visual. A group of popular kids, 4 boys, 1 girl, blocking the hall near the bleachers, smirks painted across their faces. "Didn't you hear? You're the star this year." Lily's throat tightened. She had never signed up for any talent show, never wanted to be the center of attention. Someone must have put your name there as a joke. Guess everyone loves a good laugh. The group bursts into cruel laughter. Phones are pulled out, cameras ready. Visual, Lily's trembling hand clutching her jacket zipper. She tried to slip past, heart pounding, but one boy stepped in front of her, blocking the way. "Come on, sing something. Let's hear that quiet little voice." He snatches the earbuds from her jacket pocket and tosses them to the ground. Sound. The sharp crack of earbuds hitting concrete. Lily stumbles, but doesn't fall. Her chest heaves as tears threaten. Visual. The hallway suddenly feels colder, emptier. No teachers, no friends, just stares and sneers. Just then, the low rumble of a pickup truck interrupts. Dean Harris, a man weathered by life's storms, steps out of his battered old truck. His eyes, sharp and tired, scan the scene. Dean's voice, calm but firm, breaks through the tension. "Enough. Leave her alone." The bullies turn, startled. They exchange uneasy glances. "We were just joking, mister." Dean steps forward, phone in hand. "I'm recording. I know your names. You can choose. Parents, principal, police." The bullies scatter like startled birds. The girl hesitates, looking at Lily with something vulnerable, but quickly runs after the others. Dean kneels beside Lily, picking up her cracked earbuds and handing them back. "You okay?" Lily nods, then shakes her head, then nods again. "Come on, let me give you a ride." They walk to the truck in silence. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows. Narrator hopeful. Sometimes all it takes is one person to see you. Not for what you are, but for what you might become. Scene fades as the truck drives away. The old truck rumbled quietly as it rolled away from the school parking lot, the city noises fading behind them. Inside, the silence was thick, but not uncomfortable. Lily sat clutching her jacket tightly, eyes fixed on the worn floor mat beneath her feet. Dean glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his expression softening. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently, breaking the quiet. "Sometimes the silence is enough." Lily's fingers trembled as she tightened her grip on the edge of the seat. She swallowed hard, the knot in her throat refusing to loosen. After a moment, her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Why did you help me?" Dean took a slow breath, memories flickering behind his tired eyes. "Because no one should ever feel that small. Like their voice doesn't matter." He glanced down at the steering wheel, voice low. "I had a daughter once. She loved to sing. I wasn't there when she needed me. I couldn't protect her." Lily looked up, her own eyes glistening. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "No, don't be. I can't change the past. But maybe, just maybe, I can help someone now." The truck slowed as they reached a modest house set back from the road. The peeling paint and cracked porch told stories of better days, but a warm light glowed through the front window. Dean killed the engine and turned to Lily. "This is where you can be safe," he said, "where your voice belongs." Lily hesitated, then nodded. The two stepped out, the crisp evening air wrapping around them. Inside the garage, the scent of cedar and old stories greeted her. Against the far wall, an upright piano waited. Dusty, but dignified. Dean gestured to it. "Ever sung with a piano?" She shook her head, unsure. "Well, tonight's a first," he smiled. She sat down cautiously. Dean's fingers found the keys, playing a low, gentle chord that vibrated through the air. Lily took a shaky breath and sang. Her voice was raw, unpolished, but undeniably real, carrying the weight of years she'd never spoken aloud. Dean didn't interrupt. He let her voice fill the garage, watching as something inside her began to soften, to bloom. When she finished, Lily's lip quivered, and she whispered, "I messed up." Dean shook his head slowly. "You didn't mess anything up. That was the most honest sound I've heard in years." She blinked, uncertain whether to believe him. Dean rose and walked over to a cluttered shelf, pulling down a thermos. Pouring hot chocolate into a chipped mug, he handed it to her. "Here, warm up. It gets cold in here." She took it with both hands, the warmth spreading through her fingers. Her eyes flickered to the piano. "You play like you're telling a story." Dean smiled faintly, a distant sadness flickering across his face. "My wife used to say that. She was the real musician. I just banged on keys and tried not to ruin the feeling." Lily's eyes widened. "You had a wife?" Dean nodded, voice quiet. "She died years ago." The silence between them was soft, filled with unspoken loss. "She had a daughter," Dean added after a pause. Her name was Rachel. She was a lot like you. Lily's gaze lifted, curiosity and something deeper shining in her eyes. Not just because of her voice, Dean said, but because of how she looked at the world, like it had both disappointed her and dared her to keep going anyway. Lily's fingers tightened around the mug as she absorbed his words. The pain in his eyes mirrored her own, and in that quiet garage, two broken souls began to find a fragile connection. Dean sat back at the piano and tapped the wood gently. You want to try something? Just hum. No words. Let whatever you're feeling ride on the sound. She hesitated, eyes darting toward the open garage door, as if afraid someone might be listening. No one's out there, Dean said softly. This place, it's safe. Slowly, she nodded. Dean played a gentle progression in C major, warm and maternal. Lily closed her eyes and hummed. Her voice wavered uncertainly at first, then steadied. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't practice. It was release. A quiet surrender to the music and to something inside herself she hadn't known was waiting. Dean watched her with a tenderness that surprised even him. For the first time since Rachel passed, music felt like more than a memory. It felt like hope. When the last note faded, Lily opened her eyes. Why are you helping me? Dean looked toward the corner of the garage, where a faded photograph hung. A girl in a choir dress smiled brightly beside a woman with auburn hair. I couldn't help the person I loved most when she needed it, he said finally. So maybe now I help who I can. That's how I stay human. Lily didn't answer, but the way she looked at him had changed. Something invisible had passed between them. Trust, maybe. Hope, definitely. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, the garage held a quiet promise. The morning light filtered softly through the cracked blinds of Dean's modest kitchen, casting long shadows across the cluttered table. Dean stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, his mind still on last night's session with Lily. The memory of her hesitant hum, the fragile beauty in her voice, lingered like a melody refusing to fade. Outside, the world moved on obliviously, but inside the garage, something new was taking root. A bond forged in music and quiet understanding. Lily arrived that afternoon with a worn notebook clutched tightly to her chest. Her hair was pulled back, eyes cautiously brightened by a glimmer of hope. Dean greeted her with a nod and a smile, offering her the metal stool beside the piano. Now her sacred space. You ready to put some words to that melody? Dean asked gently. Lily hesitated, flipping open the notebook. The pages were filled with messy, uneven handwriting, fragments of lyrics, raw and honest, not polished, but deeply real. This is yours? Dean asked, his voice soft. She nodded, cheeks flushing. It's not perfect. Dean shook his head. It's beautiful, but don't let it get to your head." His faint smile was genuine, the kind that reached his eyes. For the first time, Lily laughed, a real laugh, light and free. They spent hours there, line by line, note by note. Dean never rushed her, never scolded when her pitch wavered. Instead, he guided her with patient demonstrations, coaxing each note out of silence like a shepherd calling home a lost lamb. Sometimes words weren't necessary. Dean simply watched, and Lily understood. This was the hardest lesson. That music was as much about listening as it was about singing. Midday brought sandwiches on the back steps, peanut butter and jelly for Lily, egg salad for Dean. They ate in companionable silence, the kind that only forms between people who have begun to trust. "Why music?" Lily asked suddenly, chewing slowly. Dean took a long sip of iced tea before answering. "Because when words fail, sound still reaches." "Did you always love it?" He nodded. "Since I was a kid. My mom played banjo in a bluegrass band. I learned piano by ear in the church basement." "Why did you stop?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. Dean's jaw tightened. "When Rachel died, every note felt like her voice calling from a place I couldn't reach. I thought if I never played, again the pain would go away." Lily looked down at her shoes, one lace frayed, the other double-knotted. "Grief doesn't leave when you go silent," Dean continued. "It grows, fills the spaces you abandon." She looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time. Maybe music wasn't supposed to be quiet. Maybe it was meant to carry the ones we've lost. That evening, Lily sang the first verse of her song without stopping, her voice cracking on one word, forgetting a line and humming it back. Dean knelt beside her when she finished, eyes steady. "That was brave." Lily looked startled. "Not because it was flawless, but because it was real. That's the kind of singing people don't forget." Her cheeks flushed, eyes shimmering with disbelief and a fragile hope. "Can I come back tomorrow?" Dean smiled. "You can come back every day." Later that night, Dean sat alone in the garage, playing back the recordings on an old tape deck. The hiss and crackle made the moments feel timeless, memories etched in sound. He labeled the tape simply, "Lily, Day 3, and slid it carefully into a wooden box beside another tape labeled "Rachel, Last Song." Closing the lid, he felt something he hadn't in years: peace. The garage no longer smelled just of oil and cedar, but of cocoa, worn wood, and possibility. Days passed. Lily arrived each afternoon like clockwork. She no longer needed Dean to walk her to the garage. She knew the way, dropped her backpack at the same spot, and began humming before she even sat down. Her voice, once hesitant, now carried a thread of confidence woven with something older than her years, something aching and beautiful. Dean noticed the change in how she moved to the rhythm, corrected her own phrasing, lingered on notes as if claiming her space. She was still quiet, still guarded, but in the music, she came alive. One Friday, Dean arrived early and cleared a shelf near the piano, dusting it off. He placed a small lamp, a metronome, and a jar filled with sharpened pencils. When Lily walked in, she noticed the changes immediately. "What's all this?" she asked. "Your songwriting corner," Dean said, setting down a mug of cocoa. "Every artist needs a sacred spot." Lily smiled shyly. "You really think I'm an artist?" Dean sat on the piano bench, looking up at her. "I think you're something else. I'd rather help you figure out what that is than try to label it too soon." She sat down, opening her notebook to the messy lyrics from the night before. Though the handwriting was uneven, the words carried a truth deeper than she could say aloud. Dean tapped the keys gently, warming up the piano. "Want to sing it through?" Lily shook her head. "Not yet." He nodded. "Hum it first. Let's find the shape." She closed her eyes, drew a slow breath, and began. Hours passed as they worked line by line, note by note, finding where her voice held strong, where it wavered. Dean never raised his voice or showed frustration like other teachers had when she struggled. Instead, he played the notes slowly, coaxing her back with gentle demonstrations. Sometimes he said nothing, just watched. Lily found that the hardest part to explain. By midday, Dean suggested a break. They sat on the back steps eating sandwiches, the world outside forgotten for a while. "Why music?" Lily asked again, her voice softer. Dean smiled faintly. "Because sometimes, when words fall short, music still reaches." Lily nodded thoughtfully, eyes shining. Dean looked at her. A girl who'd been invisible to so many, now standing in the light of her own song. And for the first time in a long time, hope felt real. Evenings in the garage grew longer and warmer as autumn slipped into winter. The soft hum of the piano mingled with quiet conversations, stories traded between melodies, memories shared in the spaces between notes. Dean rarely spoke of the past, but Lily could sense the weight of things unsaid in his steady gaze. One night, as the snow whispered against the windows, Lily settled beside the piano with her notebook open, the words inside raw and messy. Dean watched her carefully, the flicker of a distant pain crossing his features. "I never told you much about my wife," he began quietly. "She was the heart of my world. She sang like the morning light, bright, uncatchable." Lily looked up, her breath catching. "What happened?" Dean's hands trembled slightly as they hovered over the keys. "She got sick. Before I knew it, she was gone." His voice cracked. "And then Rachel, my daughter, she stopped singing after that." Lily's fingers traced the edge of her notebook. her own voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." Dean shook his head. "No, it wasn't your fault. I thought if I stopped playing, the pain would fade. But grief doesn't work that way. It grows louder in the silence." He looked at her then, eyes searching. Music became something I feared, a reminder of what I lost. Lily's voice gained strength. Maybe music isn't just about the past. Maybe it's about carrying those we love with us. Dean nodded slowly, a faint smile breaking through the sorrow. "Maybe you're right." In the garage's quiet glow, their shared pain became a bridge, connecting two broken souls. Weeks passed, and Lily's voice grew richer, steadier. The rough edges softened with each note, the melodies now carrying stories of resilience and hope. Dean cleared a corner of the garage, setting up a small stool with a knitted cushion, a music stand, and a notebook labeled with Lily's name. "You've got your own songwriting corner now," Dean said one afternoon, handing her a warm mug of cocoa. "Every artist needs a sacred space." Lily's eyes shone with tentative pride as she pinned a wrinkled lyric card to the corkboard. It read, "I thought I was a whisper, but maybe I'm a song." Dean read it aloud, smiling. "That's good." "Too simple," Lily said shyly. "Simples." "Honest," Dean replied. "Honest is everything." Together, they filled the board with snippets of lyrics, half-finished melodies, and hopeful one-liners. Sometimes Lily scratched them out, sometimes rewrote, but every word belonged to her. Dean never touched a single one. Their afternoons blended into a tapestry of growth, healing, and quiet joy. And in the stillness of that garage, music began to stitch together the broken pieces of their lives. One crisp morning, Lily arrived at the garage, clutching an old, faded notebook. Her fingers trembled slightly as she placed it gently on the piano bench. Dean's eyes narrowed in curiosity as he opened the cover, revealing pages of unfinished songs, handwritten with shifting strokes, from neat and confident to shaky and uncertain. "These were my mom's," Lily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "She wrote them before she left, before everything changed." Dean ran his fingers over the paper, feeling the weight of a woman's dreams trapped in time. "She was a songwriter?" Lily nodded. "She wanted to go to Nashville, chase her music dreams, but she got stuck. With my dad. With life." Dean's face softened. He knew those dreams, the ones left behind, the songs left unfinished. "You used to sing to me when you were little," Lily continued, eyes misting. "Mom's songs were stories about the rain, about how the sky wasn't crying, but remembering." Dean smiled faintly, lost in the memory. "Sounds like she understood. Things most of us don't." The garage seemed to hold its breath. Lily's secret inheritance wasn't wealth or status, but a legacy of music, unfinished melodies, waiting for someone brave enough to carry them forward. "Let's finish one of her songs," Dean said quietly, his voice steady. "Sometimes healing isn't about writing new songs. It's about completing the ones left behind." Lily looked up, startled but hopeful. Together, they chose a haunting melody called Hollow Sound, with an unfinished chorus that hung in the air like a question. They worked for hours, Dean at the piano, Lily leaning over the keys, her voice low but insistent. Line by line, note by note, they pieced the song together. Dean didn't just hear the music, he saw the girl beside him, fragile yet fierce, a storm contained in a teacup. When the song was finally whole, Lily asked with a shy smile, "Will you play it with me?" Dean hesitated, the thought of performing stirring old wounds. The last time he'd been on stage was with Rachel, just before she passed. Music back then had been both a balm and a blade. But looking at Lily, he saw something new, a chance at restoration. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll play." That night, as the garage emptied and the house settled into darkness, Dean sat alone at the piano. He lifted the lid of the wooden box beside him, the one holding Rachel's tapes, and placed Lily's newest recording inside. The box was no longer a tomb of loss, but a vessel of beginnings. Outside, the first frost of the season settled softly on the porch steps. Inside, the music carried the promise of healing and hope. The cold morning air bit sharply as Lily stepped out of her grandmother's house. The worn edges of her denim jacket pulled tight around her. Her grandmother's eyes, once fiery and full of life, now held a distant dimness, the kind that only years of worry can carve into a soul. "I hear you've been helping her sing," the frail woman said quietly when Dean arrived to pick Lily up. There was a softness in her voice, layered with unspoken fears. Dean nodded, giving her space. She just needed a place to be herself. "She doesn't get much of that," her grandmother admitted, her gaze dropping to her wrinkled hands. "Her mother left. Her father, he wasn't kind." Dean's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, understanding the weight behind her words. The car ride was silent at first, the hum of tires on pavement the only sound. Then Lily broke through. "What kind of music do you like?" she asked, eyes watching the road ahead. Dean smiled faintly. "Sad songs, old country, when it was stories, not just beer and pickup trucks." Lily chuckled softly. "I like stories, too." Back in the garage, Lily pulled out her notebook and showed Dean some lyrics. Rough, honest, raw. He read them carefully, blinking twice before replying. "You wrote this?" She nodded. "It's not polished." Dean shook his head. "It's beautiful, but don't let it go to your head." For the first time that night, Lily laughed. A full, genuine laugh that filled the space between them. Dean couldn't sleep that night. He sat alone in the garage, playing back the recording of Lily's humming on his old tape recorder. He didn't know what would come of this, didn't know if the girl's voice would ever reach beyond these walls. But one thing was clear: the world needed to hear her. The next morning, Lily woke with a lighter heart. The heaviness hadn't vanished. That hollow ache never fully leaves. But beneath it stirred something new, a quiet ember of possibility. As sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, she whispered a promise to herself, a vow to find her voice, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks, and the garage transformed from a dusty workshop into a sanctuary of sound and possibility. The walls, once lined with clutter and forgotten tools, now cradled shelves filled with jars of screws, scraps of wood, and worn mugs, each telling a story of resilience and quiet dedication. Near the upright piano, Dean cleared a small corner just for Lily, placing a metal stool with a knitted cushion, a music stand, and a notebook marked clearly with her name. "You've got a songwriting corner now," Dean said one afternoon, handing her a warm mug of cocoa. "Every artist needs a sacred space." Lily smiled shyly, the corners of her lips lifting for the first time in what felt like forever. "You really think I'm an artist?" Dean sat on the piano bench and looked up at her with steady eyes. "I think you're something else. I'd rather help you figure out what that is than try to label it too soon." She settled onto the stool and opened her notebook, flipping through messy, uneven pages filled with lyrics and melodies, words that spoke of heartbreak and hope, fear and courage. Dean tapped the keys gently, warming up the piano with familiar chords, his fingers dancing across the worn wood. "Want to sing it through?" he asked softly. Lily shook her head, nervous. "Not yet?" Dean nodded, understanding. "Hum it, then. Let's find the shape." With eyes closed, Lily drew a deep breath and began to hum. Her voice wavered uncertainly at first, but gradually grew steadier, more confident. It wasn't a performance, nor practice. It was a release, a surrender to the music and to the emotions she'd long kept buried. Hours passed in this quiet communion, the only sounds the piano's gentle chords and Lily's soft humming. Dean never rushed her, never scolded. Instead, he guided her with patience, offering gentle demonstrations and quiet encouragement. Sometimes words were unnecessary, just presence and understanding. In those moments, Lily learned that music was as much about listening as it was about singing. Midday brought a break. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for Lily, egg salad for Dean. They sat on the back steps, sharing food and stories, the world beyond momentarily forgotten. "Why music?" Lily asked, chewing slowly. Dean smiled wistfully. "Because when words fall short, sound still reaches." "Did you always love it?" He nodded. "Since I was a kid." My mom played banjo in a bluegrass band. I learned piano by ear in the church basement. Why did you stop? Lily's voice was barely a whisper. Dean's jaw tightened. When Rachel died, every note felt like her voice calling from a place I couldn't reach. I thought if I never played again, the pain would go away. Lily looked down at her shoes, one lace frayed, the other double knotted. Grief doesn't leave when you go silent, Dean said softly. It grows, fills the spaces you abandon. She met his gaze, hope flickering. Maybe music wasn't supposed to be quiet. Maybe it was meant to carry the ones we've lost. Dean nodded slowly, a faint smile touching his lips. Maybe you're right. And in that quiet garage, amid the faded echoes of past sorrows and future dreams, two broken hearts found a fragile harmony. One chilly evening, as the sky darkened to a deep navy, Dean sat at the kitchen table, his face lit only by the soft glow of his phone screen. He frowned as he listened again to a recording, voices caught in the act, whispering threats, pressing school officials to keep Lily off the talent show. The unmistakable tone of his sister-in-law, cold and commanding, echoed through the speakers. Dean's jaw clenched. This wasn't just schoolyard cruelty anymore. It was a calculated attempt to silence Lily, to erase her before she had a chance to shine. He stared at the phone, then dialed Lily's number. When she answered, his voice was low but urgent. Lily, we've got something. Minutes later, Lily arrived at the garage, her eyes wide and wary. Dean played the recording for her. As the cold, clipped words filled the room, Lily's face hardened with resolve. They want to stop me, she whispered. Dean nodded. But we have something they don't. The truth. Together, they crafted a plan. The recording would be shared with trusted teachers and a local journalist known for uncovering injustice. Allies emerged, people willing to stand with them against the weight of power and privilege. Lily practiced harder than ever, her voice growing stronger, richer, a clear thread of courage weaving through every note. Dean never pushed or rushed. He was steady, a quiet anchor amid the storm. Their connection deepened, subtle touches and shared smiles hinting at something tender beneath the surface. But shadows lurked always close. The threat of her aunt's influence, the pressure from the school, the whispers behind closed doors, all a reminder that this fight was far from over. One night, as Lily hummed a new melody in the quiet garage, Dean watched her with pride and something deeper, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, their voices together could shatter the silence. Minutes before the talent show was set to begin, the backstage area buzzed with nervous energy. Students adjusted sequined costumes, whispered last-minute encouragements, and paced in anticipation. But Lily stood apart, clutching her notebook tightly, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Her closest friend, Someone she had confided in, approached quietly but with a cold edge in her eyes. "I can't do this, Lily. I'm sorry." The words landed like a blow, and with a quick glance around to make sure no one was watching, she handed Lily a folded piece of paper. The private lyrics Lily had shared in trust. Lily's breath caught. Betrayal seared through her chest. Her voice faltered as panic whispered lies. "What if I'm not good enough? What if they laugh?" Dean found her moments later, sitting alone on the floor behind the curtain, eyes glassy with unshed tears. He sat beside her, steady and calm. "You're stronger than this," he said softly. "Remember who you are. The girl who faced the worst and still kept going." She wiped her cheeks, drawing a shaky breath. "What if I forget the words? What if I trip walking out there?" Dean smiled gently. "Then you make it part of the show. It's your story. Every stumble, every note." As the stage manager called her name, Lily rose, determination flickering in her eyes. She adjusted the microphone, her fingers trembling just a little. The room fell silent. Her voice began soft, tentative, then grew in strength and clarity. Each word unfurled like a ribbon of light, carrying every ounce of her truth. The audience was captivated. Even those who had once mocked her sat still, caught in the spell of her song. From the wings, Dean watched, tears streaming down his face. Pride swelled in his chest, fierce and pure. In that moment, Lily was no longer the girl they had tried to humiliate. She was a beacon, a voice that refused to be silenced. Backstage, the echoes of applause still lingered, but Lily's legs felt like they were made of glass. She sank into a folding chair, guitar resting across her lap, hands shaking, not from fear, but from the overwhelming stillness that followed, the storm of her performance. Dean crouched beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. Lily shook her head, eyes wide with disbelief. "No." "We did." A single tear slipped down her cheek, her chest rising and falling with emotion she couldn't yet name. Dean smiled softly, the pride in his eyes shining brighter than any spotlight. Later that evening, the garage was bathed in a warm glow. Lily opened the wooden box on the shelf and carefully placed the recording of the live performance inside. She didn't say a word. None was needed. Dean closed the lid slowly. The familiar weight of the silence now filled with promise instead of grief. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall gently, softening the sharp edges of the world. Dean stood by the window with a mug of black coffee, watching flakes drift through the branches of the old oak tree. He hadn't slept much, but for the first time in years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. The wooden box sat quietly on the shelf, no longer a tomb of lost voices, but a sanctuary for new beginnings. Inside, among the tapes and lyrics, lay the newest edition, Lily's Song, a testament to courage, healing, and the power of a voice finally heard. A few days after the talent show, Lily found herself summoned to the school office. The familiar pang of anxiety tightened her chest as she walked through the hallways, heads turning, whispers trailing behind her like shadows. Old habits died hard, but this time something was different. She held her chin high, steadying herself with a breath she hadn't known she could summon. Principal Harmon greeted her with a surprisingly warm smile, the kind that felt genuine despite the circumstances. "There's a county event coming up," the principal began, her voice calm. "A regional showcase for student artists. Music, writing, performance. We're allowed to nominate one act from each school." Lily blinked, heart skipping a beat. "We'd like to nominate you," Principal Harmon continued, "if you're willing." Her mind spun. She glanced briefly at Dean, who stood silently nearby, a reassuring presence. Lily nodded, swallowing the nervous flutter in her stomach. "I'd like that." Back in the garage, Lily shared the news with Dean. He handed her the best pen he had, the one with real ink. She grinned, determination lighting her eyes. "Only for big songs," she joked. They sat side by side at the piano, not practicing. Hollow sound, but instead beginning something new. Lily pulled out a blank page. "I want to write something new," she said softly. Dean raised an eyebrow. "Already?" she nodded. "I don't want to be the girl who sang once. I want to say something else, something more." Dean smiled slowly. "Then let's find that next song." As the evening deepened, Lily's pen moved steadily across the page, crafting lyrics not just for herself, but for every silent voice longing to be heard. She wrote for the girl who sat alone on the bus, for the boy who doodled lyrics in the back of his math book, for the student who walked past the music room every day but never entered. With each word, the song took shape, a quiet anthem of courage and hope. The day of the regional showcase arrived with a quiet buzz of anticipation. The community center's small auditorium, though humble and worn, was filled with folding chairs, a dusty spotlight, and an old piano that hadn't been tuned in years. But none of that mattered to Lily. What mattered was the chance to stand on that stage and share her story. Dressed in her familiar denim jacket and the silver pendant Dean had given her, a symbol of strength and connection, Lily stepped onto the worn wooden floorboards. Her new song, a gentle but powerful anthem called "Light Between the Cracks," rested in her hands. The room settled into a hush as she approached the microphone. Her voice began soft, almost fragile, weaving words that didn't scream for attention, but invited the listeners to lean in and hear the quiet courage beneath. "You don't need to shine to matter," she sang, her eyes scanning the faces before her. "You don't need to scream to speak. If they call you broken, shattered, just be the light between the cracks. they couldn't see. The audience sat still, the weight of her words settling deep into their hearts. No thunderous applause followed, just a profound silence, a shared breath held in reverence. Then, from the second row, a girl stood and began to cry, not tears of sadness, but of recognition, of seeing herself in Lily's words for the first time. The room remained silent, allowing the moment to live. Backstage, Lily sipped juice by the vending machines, the tension easing from her shoulders. Dean watched from a distance, his heart swelling with quiet pride at the grace with which she had carried herself. "That was amazing," he said as they reunited. Lily smiled, cheeks flushed. "Rachel would have loved this." Dean nodded, a soft warmth filling the space between them. "She would be proud. You're giving her dream a voice." Later that week, Lily was invited to speak at a local middle school, sharing her journey with students who hadn't yet found their own voices. Her hands trembled slightly, but her words were steady. "I thought I didn't have a voice," she told them. "But I did. I just didn't know how to trust it." When a boy asked what helped her most, Lily glanced toward the back where Dean stood, silently supporting her. "Someone who listened," she said simply. That night, after the school presentation, Lily returned to the garage alone, the quiet sanctuary where her voice had first found room to breathe. Dean was already there, sitting at the piano, his fingers gently plucking the worn keys. "You've changed," he said softly, without looking up. Lily smiled faintly. "Do you think so?" Dean nodded, his eyes warm. "You stand different. You speak different. You even hum like you believe it." They sat in silence for a moment, the music weaving around them like a gentle embrace. Then Lily looked up, curiosity mingling with vulnerability. "Do you think we ever stop needing people?" Dean's gaze met hers, steady and sure. "No, I think we just get better at recognizing the ones who matter." She smiled, the weight in her chest lightening. Before leaving, Lily opened the wooden box and carefully placed another recording inside, this one labeled with the song from the school presentation. She didn't speak. Her actions said enough. Dean closed the lid slowly. The silence that followed filled not with emptiness, but with quiet joy. Outside, the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. Weeks passed, and the garage, once just a place of solitude and memories, blossomed into a gathering spot for the community. Soft lights were strung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over folding chairs arranged in a loose circle. Parents, teachers, and students brought instruments, pies, and stories. Emily, a gentle presence with auburn hair tucked beneath a knit hat, helped string the lights and welcomed newcomers with a quiet smile. It wasn't a concert. Not exactly. There was no stage, no applause, Just a circle of voices sharing songs, some shaky, some bold, some no more than a hum. Lily sat on the stool, fingers steady on her guitar strings, her voice a delicate thread weaving the room together. Each note pulled people closer, stitch by quiet stitch, unraveling fear and weaving hope. When she finished, she turned to Dean. "Your turn," she said softly. Dean raised an eyebrow, a grin tugging at his lips. "Mine?" She nodded. It had been years since Dean had played solo in front of people, since Rachel. Yet tonight, it didn't feel like a return, but a beginning. He walked to the piano, sat down, and began to play a melody born not from pain, but from presence. A quiet song written in the months between heartbreak and healing. As the final note faded, the garage held a stillness that was full, not of silence, but of peace. People stood, not in applause, but in gratitude. Some hugged, some nodded, all bearing witness to the quiet miracles of connection and renewal. Lily crossed the room and wrapped her arms around Dean's waist. "We did it," she whispered. Dean looked down at her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "You were the miracle?" he said. She smiled, soft and sure. "No," she replied. "The miracle was that someone waited long enough to hear it." The night of the community benefit concert arrived like a breath held too long, thick with anticipation and hope. The town hall auditorium was alive with history. The polished wooden floors creaked under the weight of folding chairs, reserved. Seats for donors and school officials gleamed under the soft glow of stage lights, and the murmur of a crowd settled into expectant silence. Lily stood behind the curtain, heart pounding fiercely, hands trembling slightly as she clutched the silver pendant Dean had given her. It felt heavier tonight, a talisman anchoring her to the courage that had carried her this far. Dean tuned the guitar beside her, the familiar scent of cedar and old memories filling the air. He said nothing at first, letting the silence between them settle like a prayer. "This isn't about proving anything, Lily," he finally said, his voice steady and warm. "You've already done that." Her eyes searched his, wide and uncertain. "Then, what is it about?" she asked. Dean smiled gently, his fingers lightly strumming the guitar strings. "You found your voice," he said. "Now, you get to use it, to give someone else the courage to find theirs." Lily nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking deep. One by one, the acts took the stage. Middle school choirs, acoustic duets, a nervous poetry reading from a boy with oversized glasses. Polite applause followed each performance, but beneath the surface, a low hum of anticipation grew. When Dean stepped onto the stage alone, guitar in hand, the room hushed completely. He cleared his throat and adjusted the microphone. "I'd like to introduce someone," he began, voice steady and sincere. "She's not just a singer, or a student, or a songwriter. She's the reason this night exists, because she reminded us all that even the quietest voice can echo farther than we imagine." He paused, eyes shining. "She didn't just write a song," he added. "She rewrote a story." With a nod, he stepped back. Lily walked onto the stage, boots clicking softly on the wooden floor, heart pounding loud enough to drown out the audience. She held her guitar like an extension of herself, spine straight, chin lifted. The room leaned forward, breath held. She began without introduction, no speech, just music. Her song, Unwritten Light, was not about pain or healing, but about what comes after. She sang, "I'm not the chapter that they folded. I'm the pages still to write. I'm the hand that reached for silence and came back holding light." Her melody was simple, 4 chords, a soft rhythm, but the room sat utterly still. Even the rustling programs and coughs ceased. She sang like she had nothing to prove, like she was finally home. Behind her, Dean played gentle harmonies on guitar. For the first time since his daughter passed, Dean didn't feel haunted by the music beside him. He felt honored. In the final verse, Lily's eyes swept over the crowd, no longer performing, but inviting. If you're standing at the silence, wondering who you are inside, just hum the song you haven't written. It will carry you to light. When the last chord faded, there was a pause, longer than she expected. No one clapped immediately. The silence was not uncertainty, but reverence. Then, from the back forward, the audience rose as one. A standing ovation unlike any other. Tears, smiles, hands held tightly. Backstage, Lily collapsed into Dean's arms, trembling but smiling. "I didn't forget," she whispered. Dean held her gently. "I knew you wouldn't." The night after the concert, the garage was quiet, bathed only in the soft glow of the lamp in the corner. Dean sat alone, the wooden box resting on the shelf before him. His fingers traced the smooth cedar surface as he opened it gently. Inside lay tapes, memories, voices, fragments of lives stitched together by music and love. He carefully placed the newest recording, Lily's live performance, beside Rachel's last song. Then, from a small stack, he pulled out a crumpled lyric card. It was the first one Lily had ever written, the words still raw and hopeful. "I thought I was a whisper, but maybe I'm a song." Dean placed it atop the pile and closed the lid, the weight of the moment settling over him. Not with sorrow, but with quiet joy. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the music of a new beginning. Weeks later, news spread. Through town, Lily's aunt's attempts to silence her had backfired. The community, inspired by Lily's courage and truth, rallied. The aunt faced her reckoning, her influence diminished by the power of a single girl's voice. Dean and Lily stood side by side, partners in life and music. Their journey had not ended. It had only just begun. Together, they dreamed of building a space where unheard voices could rise, where stories could be sung, and where healing could bloom. Their song would echo forever, a melody of second chances, redemption, and the courage to be heard.